ACT's former coalition partners National also came under fire from Mr Seymour for what he sees as their tendency to merely react to what Labour is doing.
I reckon if the Labour Party introduced full-blown communism to New Zealand, the National Party would campaign on managing it better.
National's State Services spokesman Nick Smith says his party has some real sympathy for ACT's concerns around the number of people working in the beehive.
It comes at substantive expense to the government and taxpayers, and we don't necessarily think that's going to result in any improvement in the quality of government.
But Mr Smith has concerns about what it could mean for rural communities if electorates were significantly expanded. National is also more cautious when it comes to the Māori seats, which he says could create difficulties for race relations. Mr Seymour says discussions are taking place about possibly changing the party's name, and the Reform or Liberal Party are two options on the cards.
There's a very lively and open discussion within the party about how we go forward. What we stand for is pretty certain, but the way that it's reflected in our name is something a lot of the membership have questioned, and as the leader I welcome that debate.
As to that new ACT party policy, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Winston Peters declined to comment. For Morning Report, call Matthew Tunis in Aho.
18 minutes to 8 now. Well, let's discuss some of that with the National Party leader Simon Bridges, who is with me for his weekly slot with me in the Auckland studio. Good morning to you, Mr Bridges.
Kia ora.
If we could start with the main element that David Seymour was talking about over the weekend, he is going to introduce the smaller government bill. This would be a members' bill, so he takes his chances in the lot, see if he can get it drawn out as a members' bill. It would reduce the number of MPs to 100, limit the number of ministers to 20 and abolish the Māori seats. If it is drawn out, will you vote for it?
I don't know yet. I think we have a good look at it in good faith. I mean, there is. Let's acknowledge the two things going on here. One is I think there's definitely some attraction about a smaller parliament and a smaller executive. We've got 31 on our executive at the moment. It's the biggest, make work scheme actually in government we've ever seen. So there is some attraction there. But let's also be honest about it. There's some significant fish hooks, whether they be Māori seats, whether it be the fact that in the South Island you've already got seats that are bigger than the state of Israel, and you'd be increasing those. And I think there would ultimately, or potentially at least, be some issues around how MMP would work. So I don't think there's a free lunch in it. It's got some attraction. Actually, final point I would make is all of these things, and we should have seen it on Waka Jumping, which is going through Parliament at the moment, should have 75% of parliamentarians and actually referenda on them, I think.
Okay, so you've obviously done a bit of thinking about it.
Yep.
Surely you can tell us, it sounds from what I'm hearing, that you would not vote for it.
Well, I think we'd have to see how much David Seymour was prepared to change it and look at some of the fish hooks I've talked about. Actually, though, I come back to it. I think there is something in the idea that I think most New Zealanders would go along with a more effective, efficient parliament, possibly smaller. And as I say, on the executive, seeing it grow out into the 30s, I think is wrong.
Yeah, but you're not a commentator. I mean,
No, I agree.
you're trying to have it all ways. You're going to have to vote on it if it is pulled out. What are you going to do?
Save that. This is a bill that has come before us yesterday. I didn't know about it before then. I think we read it. I think if there's a kernel of something there that we could see us support it to select committee, we may well do that. But look, I hear what you're saying. Ultimately, you've got to say on the issue of the Māori seats, on the issue of really large rural constituencies and what it means for MMP, I think they will be issues for it.
You've had a policy of abolishing the Māori seats in the past. Is that still your policy? It's hard to work out.
Yes, formally it is, because I think in principle the National Party caucus, and I certainly do believe, there isn't a need for those seats anymore. We have strong Māori representation in Parliament. MMP provides us that ability, but actually we see a lot of Māori win general constituency seats. All of that said, what is also true is we would want to be deeply consulting with Māoridom on that issue. I think in truth it would be a very divisive issue that's probably, and I don't say this glibly or lightly, much more trouble than it's worth.
Right, so in principle you support it, but you'd never do it.
I think it would be hard to see a situation where it happened today. I do believe, though, over time, Māoridom and more generally New Zealanders will do away with the Māori seats.
Well, they have that option already, don't they? I mean, the more who are on the roll, then the more seats you get, and the fewer who are on the Māori roll and more who are on the general roll, it draws back the number of seats. So that's there already, isn't it?
Practically, I think that's right, and it will be very interesting to see what comes out of the census, all of the flaws of the census aside. It may well be we see a situation where more Māori are voting with their feet in a sense and coming off that roll, and that will be, I think, an interesting part, if that were to be the case, of the evolution I'm really talking about, where I think one day we will see an end to the Māori seats.
Okay, let's talk about your relationship with ACT, and we'll do that in a second. But firstly, he had this to say on Jacinda Ardern. He said that we have a show Prime Minister. Jacinda Ardern is lovely. She is genuinely one of our nicest MPs. We wish her well with motherhood, but she's a show Prime Minister. He went on to say that no one actually thinks she understands anything about the economy, end quote. Do you share that view?
Leaving aside the personal comments, the comment and the criticism about Jacinda Ardern in relation to the economy is absolutely right. I could not be more critical of her last week. She had a number of issues that she put forward that were gestures that ultimately were the issues, but distractions from what, as leader of New Zealand, she should have had sole focus on. And let me just finish this. That was business confidence plummeting and an economy that is going downwards. And she did not focus on that. It was an incredible failing in her leadership.
So do you agree with him, though, when he says that she doesn't understand anything about the economy? That's what he's claiming.
I think it remains to be seen, because the truth is last week she wouldn't talk about it. It was platitudinous. It was moving on to a meaningless trade for all strategy, a bunch of other things that she wanted to talk about, when the one issue she should be focused on right now is our economy, given its real effect on jobs, on investment, on the growth of New Zealand, actually on her ability to pay for the things she says she wants to.
Okay, well, let's look finally at your relationship with ACT, because they were very critical of your party over the weekend. Quote, if the Labour Party introduced full-blown communism to New Zealand, National would probably promise to manage it better, end quote. I mean, that's
very cruel.
Well, is it true? I mean, the timbre of his comments are that really you don't stand for a lot.
Oh, we certainly do. We stand for less government, we stand for competition, we stand for the individual, actually similar things to the ACT Party. But here's the deal. We are a centre-right party. I do believe, done well, there is a gap in the market for a party that is to right of
Is
National.
It ACT, though? Will you continue to prop ACT up as you do?
I don't think I can answer that at the moment. I'm just giving you the most honest answer I can today.
Will you pull them off life support?
We will assess that, and we will be clear on that either the end of 2019 or certainly early 2020. At the moment, I don't see any reason why we would change from where we have been. But I think there is something on David Seymour about demonstrating his relevance, his seriousness, and being a party that is to the right of National, and that does, in a sense, as he was saying, keep us honest on important issues like lower taxes and compliance.
Are you going to do anything to facilitate the rise of another party on the right to try to give you some mates to win in 2020?
Look, I think on that question, let's look at the polls, and what they tell us is we are still a very popular and supported party. We're closest to the finish line, if you like. I think the reality is, whether it's New Zealand First or the Greens, these are parties that on current polls may or may not be there.
Yeah, you're talking about existing parties. I just want a final answer from you. Are you going to do anything to try to facilitate the rise of another party to give you options in 2020?
We will talk to other parties. We will see what happens. I think in the roller coaster ride that MMP in New Zealand is on at the moment, anything could happen. Will we formally do something in that area? No.
Thanks for your time this morning. That's Simon Bridges, who is the leader of the National Party. It's 10 minutes to 8 now.
Some traffic news for Auckland this morning. There's been a breakdown southbound on the southern motorway. That's blocking the left lane just before the Hill Road off-ramp. Do expect some delays in the area. Now, the government and Ngāpuhi remain deadlocked after the latest hui on treaty negotiations. Treaty Settlements Minister Andrew Little met with Hapu